for joining me today. My name is Paula Kegelman. I am with NAMI, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. I served 2 consecutive 2-year terms for the NAMI Greater Orlando affiliate. I now sit on the board of directors for NAMI Florida. I am a teacher of our signature education programs, Family-to-Family, which is the main one we'll be talking about today. I also teach Ending the Silence for them, and I speak all around Central Florida just like this, at colleges, sororities, seminars, anywhere that'll listen to me. So thanks for coming. I'm just going to talk a little bit about NAMI itself and about the Family-to-Family class. We're also going to touch on the basics class, which we'll talk about in a minute, but that is really family-to-family, but for younger, which is probably more so for what you guys are here for, depending on the age of your loved one. So let's just talk about that a little bit. So again, National Alliance on Mental Illness, we're going to talk about family-to-family.
Excuse me, you said what age?
Family-to-family, and I'll talk about that in a second, is a 12-week course for family members that have a loved one with a mental illness, okay? It's really geared for, let's say, 17 and up. The people in the class can be any age, but your loved one usually 17 and up. Basics is a mirror of family-to-family, but for those that have a loved one with a mental illness that are younger, okay? But we'll talk about the difference in a few minutes. So what is NAMI? We are the nation's largest grassroots mental health organization dedicated to improving the lives of persons living with serious mental illness and their family members, okay? We were founded in 1979. We are in every state at this point, and we have more than 1,100 local communities across the country that join together for our mission. And we do this through support, education, advocacy, and research. The nation's voice on mental illness. The Campaign for the Mind of America is a grassroots initiative to increase access to mental health treatment services by challenging public policies, priorities at the local and state and federal levels. Okay? Half a century of inadequate mental health policy has failed people with serious mental disorders and now compels community leaders to act. In every community, public health crisis is having devastating effects on education, law enforcement especially, healthcare, and business. Community leaders agree it is time to act together to fulfill the promise of recovery that is in our grasp. Okay. So NAMI Greater Orlando, which is the affiliate that is dear to my heart simply because I live in Orlando, was founded in 1985. We, again, to improve the quality of lives of individuals living with neurological brain disorders. MommyGo members are people recovering from schizophrenia, schizo-affective disorder, and other serious NBDs. Family with loved ones living with NBDs, professionals who work with people with NBDs, or caring, who support the effort of NAMI. NAMI Greater Orlando is affiliate with NAMI Florida, as I said. It's an organization that includes 30 local affiliates, 2,000 members across the state of Florida, and MommyGo, which is NAMI Greater Orlando, serves Orange and Seminole counties primarily. Our mission, again, to improve the quality of lives of the individuals and their families living with mental illness through support, education, and advocacy. And our vision is that persons living with mental disorder can recover and live productive lives in the community of their choice. Some facts on mental illness. 1 in 4 adults, approximately, and that number really should be changed, 60 million Americans at this point will experience a mental disorder in a given year. So if we count it off, 1 in 4 in this room, statistically, if you are not a person with a mental illness, you know someone with a mental illness, whether you actually know them or not. Half of all cases of mental illness begin by 14 and 3/4 by the age of 24. Major depressive disorder is the leading cause of disability in U.S. and Canada between 15 and 44. 50% of students with a mental disorder, age 14 and older, will drop out of high school, the highest dropout rate of any disability group. And suicide is the 11th leading cause of death in the U.S. between the ages of 10 and 24. It's not a statistic that we like. So, family again, 12-week course. We meet 1 night a week for 12 weeks, okay? It depends on, the day obviously depends on the teachers that are teaching it. You'll have 2 facilitators that teach that. The class is offered throughout the country. It is taught by trained family members such as myself. And the ill person that you might be there for could be sibling, a parent, a spouse, your child. In my case, it's my child. It was developed by mental health care professionals to assist families caring for their loved one with mental illness. And I will tell you this again, family-to-family and all of our signature education classes are not taught by trained professionals. I am not a psychiatrist, I am not a counselor, I am a family member. I took an extensive 3-day training to be able to teach this course. I teach it once a year. I've been teaching it for 6 or 7 years now. It is what brought me to NAMI. The course is a combination of lecture, interactive exercises, group processes. It consists of brain biology, schizophrenia, major depressive. I won't read all of them, but we do talk about medication review, basics of the brain, self-care, recovery. Most families have no training and struggle to cope with mental illnesses. The healthcare system does not provide the same level of care for mental illness, meaning families must provide the care themselves.
The dual diagnosis that you're talking about, that's probably most of
And dual diagnosis can mean a few things. That can mean substance abuse with a mental illness,
That's why I was questioning.
as well as someone like in my case, or most of you in here probably, someone that has a cognitive delay, such as my son with a mental illness, okay? And we'll talk about some facts with that as well. When you have a loved one with a cognitive delay, there is a 45% statistical chance that that loved one is going to develop a mental illness in their lifetime, which is why it's so important for us that have developmentally delayed loved ones to be aware of mental illness. Okay? Family-to-family education. So we break this down by class on this slide. Again, it's 12 weeks. In class 1, I won't go through them all, but principles learning about feelings. Class 2, schizophrenia, major depressive. We go into problem-solving workshops. We talk about medications. We do empathy workshops. Communication skills is a huge class. That is probably my favorite class of the entire 12-week course. It tends to be the light bulb moment that we have while we're taking that course. I see people in there. For whatever reason, I see a lot of dads being affected by that course, but it's kind of that aha moment where, wow, I finally get it, you know? Certainly happened to me when I took the course back in 2006. Types of mental illnesses that we cover in family-family. We touch on basically all of them, and I want to reiterate to everyone that mental illness is a biological brain disorder. No one wakes up one day and decides they want to live with a mental illness. It's not how it works, okay? It's not bad parenting. It's not anything we did. But it is what it is, and so we need to arm ourselves with knowledge. Knowledge is power. So we talk about schizophrenia, bipolar, Schizo-Affective Disorder, major depressive, anxiety disorders, and OCD. Again, we do talk about some other ones. We do touch on PTSD in the class as well. We talk extensively about anxiety disorders. Stages of emotional response. We refer to this is a chart that should be hung in your family-to-family class, and I will tell you this. The great thing about these educational programs with NAMI is whether you're taking that class in Florida or you're taking that class in Colorado, you are going to see the same class taught no matter where you go. Okay? We do not deviate from our lecture. We do not deviate from the book. The book is about this thick. I always forget to bring that with me. It's about this thick for the teachers. By the time you're done, you end up about that thick. And we just arm you with knowledge throughout the entire course. But it is taught the same way everywhere you go. So we do not deviate, which is a good thing. So if you take it here and you have a loved one that's in another state and you can get them with an affiliate with their local NAMI, they're going to take the class, they're going to get the same class that you took here. Okay? That goes for all of our classes, not just family. So these are the stages of emotional responses, dealing with catastrophic events. This is mostly when you are in crisis mode, either first diagnosed or having a relapse, if you will. Some of the things that we deal with in that are denial, hoping against hope. The needs in that type of category are support, comfort, empathy. You want a prognosis, of course, and crisis intervention. Learning to cope, This is kind of the middle stage, if you will, as we call it. This is where you have anger, guilt, resentment, recognition, and grief. There's a sense of loss that we all go through when our loved one is diagnosed with a mental illness. Moving past that is key. In that category, venting is key. Self-care, education, letting go, and getting some help from the system, and of course NAMI. Moving into advocacy, which is where I am on the stage, is understanding, acceptance, and action, and that's when we get back to restoring some type of balance in our lives and getting some response from the system itself for our loved one. Okay? Principal goals and feelings. Class provides an overview to the stages of serious illnesses. Using the stages of emotional responses chart, participants assess where they are within the cycle. And again, some people can be in 1 when they enter the class, some can be in 2, I can be in 3, but after 12 weeks, I could very well be in 1, depending on my loved one and where they are in their life. As the class progresses, we certainly hope that you move through the stages and eventually towards advocacy. So we frame these questions in family to family. Why can't someone just give me a diagnosis? Sometimes that can be the very first and hardest of all the battles that we go through with this, is getting the proper diagnosis. My son has had 2 or 3 diagnoses before we finally got the one that actually fit him. Once you have that diagnosis, things get better. But certain medications, just as everything else, cannot be taken, do not help with different illnesses. So we have to get that, what I like to call magic cocktail going, once we can get that. And that can also be a game of Russian roulette. Not every medication works for everyone. What your loved one can take, and we can have the same diagnosis, can do great for you, can put my loved one into severe anger. So we just have to find and have lots of patience and find that magic cocktail, if you will. Once we get that, we can be on better footing. Why is your response to mental illness so different? It is our goal at NAMI to have mental illness discussed as openly and as frequently and as acceptance as it is cancer, heart disease, and diabetes. That is not the case because of the stigma that lies behind mental illness, but we certainly hope we can get there one day. Classes like this help us. Getting out there, speaking openly about it, not being ashamed of it, certainly is helpful. What are the basics we need to know about the illnesses, especially with schizophrenia, starting with that? Why do people change so drastically? The basics to know about depression and mania and schizo-affective disorder, which is kind of a combo of all of that. Myths from facts, what we do when our relatives are suicidal, and helping us to cope through critical periods. These are all things that we cover in Family to Family, and we try and help guide you through the process. We also have a crisis file that we give you within our Family to Family class that can be taken out, and I have had many success stories with that file to help you walk through that. Diagnosis for schizophrenia. I was brought to NAMI in 2000. In 2005, my son had a psychotic break. He was 17 and a half, which is prime for schizophrenia, usually between the ages of 18-ish, 17, 18 to 22 for men. Usually for women, it is a little bit older, usually 20 to 24. That is for schizophrenia. He was almost 18, it was March, his birthday was in June, we had our first psychotic break. We had no idea what was happening to our child. We thought cognitive delay, with maturity level, with age, hormones, was just not meshing until he got hallucinations, and then we knew something was wrong. So, this is what brought me to NAMI. This was in 2005. It took us a little bit to get a diagnosis. Once we got that diagnosis, we were able to move on. I took Family to Family in 2006, and literally it changed the life of our entire family. I say that, I know it sounds cliche, it is very true. It taught us to be able to better cope with our son. It taught us communication skills. It helped us to be able to incorporate him into our daily lives better. It taught us boundaries, which is so important with our loved ones. No matter how delayed our loved one is, there is always boundaries that can be set, and we can stick to them. My son's a pacer. He's a ping pong ball, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. When he was first diagnosed, I said, "Stop pacing, sit down." That's just naive on my part. He physically has to pace for For me to tell him to sit down, I'm just insulting him. He can't just sit down. But the boundary to that is you cannot pace in the family room while we're watching a movie as a family. Dave, what are you doing? I'm pacing. If you can't answer that question, Dave, you're pacing. What's the rule about pacing? Go in the hallway or my bedroom. Okay, you need to go in your hallway or my bedroom. So he does. It's a very small feat, but it was monumental in my home. So again, no matter how our loved ones are, I do believe wholeheartedly there are always boundaries we can set and stick by, no matter how small they may seem to someone else. That was a huge step for our family, was to get him to stop pacing anywhere around the house. Of course, when you're out in public, it's not as easy, but you just have to learn. It is what it is. My son's a handshaker. He's a politician. He will shake your hand, introduce himself. He'll walk away. He'll come back to you and do it right again. So he is the handshaker. He should have been a politician. That's okay. That person doesn't like. We, of course, tell him space, boundaries. You already shook hands. It's all good. But that's David. That's my David. So for an acceptance on our part helps you, I think, and helped us when we went out and did things as a family to be better accepting of him as well. So that is what brought me to NAMI, what made me so passionate. My son does not always have a voice, so I am his voice. And I stand in front of any room, rooftop, classroom, seminar I can to let that voice be heard. So for schizophrenia, the criteria, there's a couple criteria here to be able to get the diagnosis and relatively quickly. It wasn't as hard for my son to be diagnosed because he met quite a bit of this criteria at the beginning. Criteria A, you have to have 2 or more of the following: delusions, hallucinations, disorganized speech, or bizarre delusions alone, or auditory hallucinations. My son had both. He saw things and he heard things. So getting a diagnosis for him wasn't as difficult as some. Some people fall more into the schizo-affective disorder than they do plain schizophrenia. It just depends. Criteria B, continuing social occupational dysfunction. Criteria C, symptoms must present for 6 months or more. Okay? Symptoms of depression: mood, depressed mood, sad or irritability, loss of interest, pleasure in daily activities, or appetite, weight loss, or weight gain. That can go either direction. It's kind of similar to stress. Some of us eat when we're stressed, some of us lose weight when we're stressed. Too much sleeping, or periods of insomnia where they don't sleep at all. Agitation, again, the pacing or restlessness can come in here, slow movements, fatigue, lack of energy, inability to think, remember, concentrate, feeling of guilt, worthlessness, and suicide thoughts. Mania, this is the high that we talk about, okay? This is elevated, euphoric, decreased need for sleep, they stay up all night, behavior, increased goal directive, involvement in pleasure activities, excessive spending. I've heard stories of a bipolar individual that was on a mania that's bought a boat because he felt he needed a boat that day. Couldn't afford the boat, but he went and bought the boat. His wife didn't like that idea when he got home and had bought a boat, but nevertheless he had bought a boat. So it was that high, and it can last for periods of time. Self-seeing, flighty ideas, very rapid thoughts, distractibility. Schizo-affective disorder. Depressive and manic mood disturbance occurring with schizophrenia. Okay? A period of last at least 2 weeks, first-rank schizophrenia symptoms with delusions and hallucinations where no mood symptoms are present at all. Bipolar disorder. 1 or more manic episodes, for bipolar 1 or more manic episodes, usually accompanied by at least 1 severe depressive episodes. Bipolar mixed is symptoms of mania, depression, occur simultaneously. Bipolar 2, severe depressive episodes alternate with hypomanic episodes, and rapid cycling, 4 or more episodes in a 12-month period of time. So some people will rapid cycle more than that, some less than that, and that means going from the highs to low. Okay?
What do you mean about hypomania? Depressed hypomania, that is.
Yeah, you're going to go high and you're going to go really low. Basics brain. So we do brain functions. We talk about the cortical, temporal, and limbic systems, the role of chemical messengers in the brain, the dopamine. We talk about genetic transmissions, and we look for second hits in the environment. This family-to-family class is really a college-level course, if you will, okay? It was written by a physician. And so we stress this chapter. It's a little hard to follow at times. It's a lot of information. But the stress of this chapter really tries to hit home that mental illness is a biological brain disorder, okay? And that's what we're trying to get across. So we spend a lot of time, a whole night, if you will, on the biology of the brain for that reason. It's a long chapter. It's a lot of lecture on the teacher's parts and a lot of following along on the participants' parts, but it's good information to know. Vocabulary, we talk a lot about this. The doctors love to throw these big words at us in the office. We don't always know what they mean, so we go over some of these in the class. There's a little glossary in the back, if you will, and it just helps you to better understand, hopefully, when you're in the room with your loved one. Okay, negative symptoms, we talk a lot about these. Allogia, impoverished thinking and speech, affective flattening, diminished ability to feel or convey emotions. Most of our loved ones will feel that one. They're just kind of blank, if you will. Just don't have any emotion at all. My son has been through that as well. Attention deficits, confusion, memory lapse. Problem solving workshop. So in this one we talk about the types of problems that are faced by family-to-family participants in the class, and we do, best way for me to describe this is we ask everyone to have homework that the week before and write down your problem, what problem you're facing right now. You bring the problem in the next week, and we try and work through some of those problems as a group for you. Sometimes it's easier to look at a problem from the outside in, as we all know, getting that other perspective, if you will. So we try and work on these problems as a group. We offer suggestions, if you will, that maybe you haven't tried. So the loved one that doesn't want to get out of bed, so or doesn't have any interest in being with the family. So what did they love before the mental illness hit? If it's cooking, we say, well, maybe you try and get them back into a cooking class, or maybe one night a week you try and get to a painting class, or the library, things like this, and we just try and offer suggestions that maybe you haven't done yourself or anyone in your family, and sometimes those suggestions are helpful. So we go over those. So this is what this class is about. So you define the problem. We talk about what you have tried in the past, and we list those things out on the board usually, and then we talk about some other options. We generate options from the class that you haven't tried. So it's a group effort, if you will, on everyone's part. And then again, we set limits here for our loved ones. Medications. We talk a lot about that, and we have a course about this. It's one night as well. It's almost a full chapter in the book. We talk a lot about all of the medications that are out there now. Our books are updated constantly. So we get new pages that we replace in our book every year. As things change, our book changes as well. So when you take the class, you'll have the most up-to-date information. Rule 1, we don't play doctor. We don't recommend medications as we're going through this class. Because again, what could work for my son could completely set yours into crisis. How medications work and treatment issues, helping to keep your relative to stay on their medications, and recognizing the signs of relapse, or triggers, as I like to call them. In my situation for my David, reality versus fantasy was very difficult for him when he was diagnosed. So David now lives in a group home. He's 27 this week, and he comes home every other weekend. So when he calls me every day on his little pre-programmable cell phone, and when he gets home from the adult day training facility with his roommates, and we talk about his day for a few minutes, and what we talk about, and if he'll say, what are we going to do this weekend? Can we watch a movie? Sure, we can watch a movie. Can we watch Jurassic Park? We'll see. Can I watch X-Men? We'll see. Next day I'll get a phone call. Can we watch Harry Potter? Can we watch this? As I'm starting to hear him, I'm starting to see him slipping a little bit. I can recognize this now. David, why don't we watch a comedy? Okay. Sometimes it's not that easy. Sometimes it is. If I can divert that and turn things and flip them before they get a little bit too bad, I have a better chance of heading off a crisis or a relapse, if you will. Learning the triggers are very important. David hears voices, still hears voices to this day. Again, he was diagnosed in 2005. He takes 6 medications throughout the day, 3 times a day. There will never be a day in my son's life that he does not hear voices. Never. I still believe he is stable and in recovery at this point. That does not mean he does not hear voices. He will always hear voices. So, considering that, we have to try. Music is the key for David. He puts them on. Headphones, loves his headphones, loves his music. He's got a little touch of autism as well. IQ 61, mild mental retardation, very functional, shaves, dresses, goes to work every day, but again, still developmentally delayed on top of it. So when he puts those headphones on and I can hear the music with the headphones on from another room because it's so loud on his ears, I know he's trying to drown something out. So I need to go in there and be like, David, we need to turn that music down. What's going on? You want to talk? No, I'm not turning it. Okay, if you want to talk, let me know. Way, sometimes he'll come back out. I'm hearing voices now. I figured so. Do you want to talk about it? Everything okay? Tell me anything bad? No? Okay. It's back to life. It is what it is. So we have to go through it, work through it together, and hopefully get to a point where he can talk a little bit better every day about it and let us know how he's feeling. And as long as voices are being negative, he's still going to hear them. So that's acceptance. That got me to advocacy and out of denial on the emotional stages of chart, okay? I had a hard time with that in the beginning. I demanded that my son would be better and that there was no way he would hear voices for the rest of his life and we've got to change something, and we need to do more, and there's been times where he's been over-medicated and when he's been under-medicated. There's been times where he's been catatonic, completely void of anything, just sat there in a chair and did not move. When a doctor looked at me once and said, this may be as good as it gets, I said, absolutely not. We may not be completely better, but I know we can be better than this. To fight for your loved one and advocate on their behalf. Again, they don't always have a voice. We need to be their voice. So, medication reviews, we talk a lot about this. Empathy workshop. This is a great class as well. We talk about a case history, a bipolar disorder history. I'm going to read a story to you. We talk about the different stages of that story, what feelings we think they might have been feeling in the different stages of the story. We break it down. Psychological impact, trauma associated with serious illness process, permanent loss of belief that one is exempt from harm, permanent loss of predictability or dependable future, defense strategies used to preserve self-esteem in mental illness, and we also do one of these for schizophrenia as well. Defensive coping strategies to preserve self-esteem in mental illness. So, this is our loved one and some of the things that we might see from them. We have to remember that we don't want the illness to define our loved one. Our loved one is still who they are, so we try and help them through that. But these are some of the things that they go through, and we have to recognize them as behaviors that are going to happen they're trying to protect their own self-esteem. So self-absorption, irritability, blaming others, resistance to change, denial, drug and alcohol abuse is common, withdrawal, suspicion, quitting jobs, abusive criticism of others, or just not wanting to talk about it. Statement communications. This is a powerful class as well. I statements versus you statements. So the you statements are negative, as I would like to say. You need to go clean your room. You need to go take a shower. You do this. You do that. We've lost them. We've already lost them at the first you. So we try and help to retrain our brains in this class to talk about different ways to communicate with our loved one in a more positive way that they will respond to. My co-teacher, whose name is Paul, which is very convenient because Paul and Paul, it's easy to remember. His son, every time he teaches the class with me, we teach it every January, his son will say, "You teach family again, aren't you, Dad?" He recognizes, it's like us taking the class all over again as we're teaching it as well. It's reminders of, wow, I haven't been so good about the I statements lately. I've been using a lot of you statements. So it's a reminder for us as loved ones as well. And so his son is in a good place right now, thank goodness. And so he'll say, "You're teaching family again, aren't you, Dad?" Yes, I am. He recognizes that as well. So again, some requests. I would like you to go to the day program. I feel better when you have something to do. I'll wait to brush your hair so we can go into town instead of saying, "You look terrible, go brush your hair. You don't smell good, go take a shower." I'm happy to wait for you while you go shower and brush your hair. Just changing the way that we phrase things can be very powerful to our loved one. I'd be more comfortable if you wouldn't blow smoke in my direction. People with mental illness are prone to smoking. There's a reason for that. It has something to do with the nicotine and the receptors in the brain. It's a calming effect. So if you have noticed that, that is why. I am happy to see you exercising versus you have gained weight, why don't you go on the treadmill? There's just a better way to say these things to our loved one in a more positive way. And when we do this, we get a better response from them. I feel good when I see you taking care of yourself. SelfCare. This is a big class for me. I'm a firm believer of self-care. We are of no use to our loved one if we are not taking care of ourselves. We have to take time out to care for ourselves. This goes with any illness, not just mental illness. We have to take care of ourselves. If we're not healthy and we're not in a good place, we cannot help our loved ones. Easier said than done, I get that. But I used to be addicted to solitaire on the computer. When David was diagnosed with schizophrenia, for whatever reason, that was my outlet. I got on there, played solitaire for 30 minutes or so. My daughter will probably back there say longer, but that's okay. And so I would play solitaire for periods of time. Now it's my Kindle. I love my Kindle. I am an avid reader all of a sudden, never used to be. Love my Kindle. It's my time. It's my decompressed time. It's time I can get away. And it's a little bit of fantasy again, get you out of reality for a few minutes. So self-care is so important. For couples, get out of the house, go have a date night, even if it's once a month, and do not talk about your loved one. That was really hard to do when my son was diagnosed. We sat at the restaurant, my husband and I just kind of sat there staring at each other the first time, like, if we're not talking about David, what are we talking about, and it's very consuming. And so you need to take that time for yourselves. I'm a firm believer. I go off on a lot of tangents in this class. We talk about the subjective burdens and painful and hidden feelings. When my son was diagnosed, because of the stigma that's behind mental illness, it's embarrassing. When you have to have a crisis intervention trained police officer at your house, neighbors don't always like the look of that, and so it's really hard to get through that. Now I just I love my son. He is a hero in my eyes because he wakes up every day and gets through his day, whether it's good or bad, and he gets through another day. So it's that simple for me. Feelings of anger, entrapment, and guilt. Again, these are all normal feelings when we have a loved one with mental illness or you are the caregiver of someone with mental illness. And feelings of grief. There's a sense of loss that we go through when our loved one is diagnosed, not only with a cognitive delay, we had to go through that grieving period at age 5, and then you have to also go through this again, 10 years later, 12 years later, we went through a whole another set of grief of what maybe David could have been versus where he's at now. Again, we try not to let the illness define our son. Our David is David. He might not be quite the same as he used to be, but he's still a heck of a guy. Objective life burdens. What are the hardest aspects of living with mental illness in your family? How has it affected your life and other members of your family? We talk about this in the class. I can tell you in my family, David is one of 4 children. David's actually my stepson. I've been with him since he was 5 years old. Again, he's 27 this week. I met my husband. He had custody of all 3 of his children, and we added that one into the bunch. So I can tell you at first there's a lot of resentment from siblings, especially for their loved one. Let's face it, when this happens, your loved one consumes your life, consumes your family. So we try and get through all of this together as a family. At some point, we hope that the siblings and everyone comes out of that stage. I can tell you that my daughter, who I'm extremely proud of, is a huge advocate for NAMI. I am also the chair of NAMI Walks for Greater Orlando. I have chaired the walk now 4 years in a row. We just had it in May. It is literally, that single event is 80 to 85% of NAMI Greater Orlando's annual budget. And when you take these classes, and I want to stress this at this point, these are free of charge to you. There is no charge to take any of our signature education programs. That doesn't mean they're free for us to put on, but they are of no charge to you. So the money, I can tell you for Greater Orlando, that we are heavy on education. When I took Family to Family in 2006, there were 2 Family to Family classes held that year, only 2. I was lucky to get in. When I did, there was a couple of cancellations. There's a waiting list for over 50 people to get into that class even to this day. In 2013, we had 9 Family to Family classes. How? We got money to be able to train teachers, to be able to put on more classes throughout the community. They go anywhere from Dr. Phillips, if you will, I don't know if you're familiar with this area, all the way to Lake Mary, where I teach. So we span across Central Florida as best we can. So the money that we raise in Greater Orlando goes directly back into the community, and we're heavy on education, so it allows us to hold more and more classes. I'm proud of that simply because I'm the walk chair for the walk, so that money is very important. When I chaired the walk in 2011 for the first time, I raised $78,000. The total that was just posted yesterday was $152,000 for this year. So again, and that's healthcare facilities, pharmaceutical companies are chiming in, the community. You know, we had over, I think the total, it was poured all day on walk day this year. It was complete. Everybody was walking with umbrellas. We still had over 600 people show up. It's a huge accomplishment. So again, that goes right back into the community, and it allows us to be able to hold more classes, train more facilitators, etc. So we talk a lot about this, recovery and rehabilitation. And we have a guest speaker, 2 guest speakers. We do one for advocacy, and we have what we call a consumer, or a person that's living with mental illness that's in recovery, come and talk to you about what it is to live with mental illness. It's a great class. We talk about the myth of permanent incapacity in mental illness, how patients or consumers find recovery, the role of rehabilitation in recovery, which is what the consumers or the person with mental illness actually wants, innovation programs, consumer family collaboration is so important. It doesn't always work that seamlessly, but we certainly hope it can. HIPAA laws prevent us at a certain age to be able to chime in as much as we'd like. What I recommend on that, I was a medical assistant X-ray tech for years, what I recommend is if your loved one's having a good day and you know they have a doctor's appointment, go with them. See if they'll sign that HIPAA form for you that day. It doesn't mean it'll be permanent, but if they're having a good day, try and make it to the best of our advantage and be able to speak to the doctor. Okay. And what happens when our loved ones do not get better? We'll talk about that as well. Essentials for recovery: a safe, stable environment, best medical treatment. I have been to 3 and 4 opinions, much less second opinions. Especially early on. I ended up right back with the doctor that I started with, but I felt better knowing that I had at least, exhausted those options for my loved one. Educated, supported family. Again, education is power. Getting involved in the community, focusing on strengths and self-determination. We are not problems. We are people with potential. 3 Ps. That's a huge statement. And sustaining hope and vision of what is possible. And then, of course, advocacy, stomping out stigma, which is what NAMI really is all about. We want to, again, be able to talk about mental illness without that stigma behind it. Statistically, our loved ones are not prone to violence. Violence is prone to them. It's unfortunate that in the news, when we hear these stories, and and shootings, etc. I'm not going to elaborate, but they are more rare. It's just unfortunate that that's what we hear in the news. So the more we can talk about this, the more we can get out there, the more statistics can be shown, the better off we'll be. Stigma and mental illness, banishing the scapegoat of people with mental illness whose conditions are considered fearful or repugnant, that they are judged to deserve their fate. We fight for care, compassion, respect for the people with brain disorders, and education through NAMI. I'm going to talk about basics for just a slide or two. Again, basics is basically the family-to-family, but for those that have younger loved ones, okay? 6-week course, I think it's 9 weeks now.
Clarify for a second, the younger loved ones, so the younger child is the child with the diagnosis, and
Yes.
the family members are going to the basic class.
Exactly.
The diagnosed child is young.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Yep.
Not the participants or
Yes.
Okay.
We do have a class for the people with mental illness called peer-to-peer. They have to be older to take that class. So that is for them. Family-to-family is for loved ones of those with an older teenager or adult person with mental illness. Basics is for the family members of someone with a younger child with a diagnosis, okay? Taught again by family members, and usually prior to the age of 13 diagnosed is what this class gears towards, okay? So there's different rules and regulations, and with doctors and all of those things that we can talk about in basics that don't apply in family-to-family because the loved ones are older. So basics is more for those that are younger. And in this class, we talk about the trauma for mental illness for the child and family. Again, biology of mental illness, getting an accurate diagnosis, the latest research, overview of treatment options, the impact of a child's mental illness on the rest of the family, overview of symptoms involving caring for children and teens, importance of record keeping. Cannot stress this enough. In my computer, I have several Word documents. I have a list of medications currently on. I have a list of medications we've tried and failed, which is a long list. I have a list of all his hospitalizations. When we have to go to the hospital, print, I'm good to go. I'm out the door. I highly recommend as well, this is the medical part of me coming back, take a business card of your primary care physician, your psychologist, whoever it may be. Stick this into your loved one's purse, wallet, fanny pack, whatever they may carry, if they carry anything, or keep it with you at all times. Even to this day, I have one in my wallet of all the medications my son is on. Just like other medications for other diagnoses, certain medications cannot be taken with others. Have a list. If your loved one is in an accident or can't speak for themselves, have a list. These caregiver or the medical field is trained to look for that list, okay? I used to recommend this for the elderly when I was in family practice, and as my son developed a mental illness, I was like, wow, this really applies to this too, and so now I try and remember to tell people that as well. Planning for crisis management relapse. Classes are taught again by teachers who are parents or other caregivers of individuals that have developed symptoms of mental illness prior to the age of 13. Again, there is no charge to the community for these classes. Support groups, we have lots of support groups as well in Orlando. I cannot speak for the NAMI affiliates throughout the country, if you will, but I do know that most of them offer them. All over. We have affiliates throughout Florida. So there are over 30 affiliates, if I'm not mistaken, throughout the state of Florida.
Yeah, that's.
I have brochures back here. You can call our NAMI office. You can go to NAMI.org, NAMI.org, and you can choose where you live, and it will tell you the affiliates in your local area as well. It'll break it down, give you phone numbers and everything. It's a great
And they
resource.
would do like programs like you, or will you go to
No.
other areas?
No, I stay in Orlando, so every affiliate has their own set of trained teachers, if you will. Now, I will tell you that not every affiliate is as pushy with education as Orlando is. We are heavy on education. It is our goal to reach as many people as possible with education. So, considering that, it depends on your affiliate, how active they are. Orlando has a very strong working board of directors. Not every affiliate is that strong, most of them are. So again, you'll just have to check with the local one, okay? So these are some of the ones. Ending the silence, I just want to talk about that for a second. Number one, because I know a lot about it, because I'm a teacher of it. This is where we're going into the high schools now. This is key. We are reaching the kids at prime age of bullying when they can potentially be diagnosed with a mental illness or know someone with one. It is showing that 4 to 13% of the kids viewing this presentation are seeking help for themselves or a loved one. That's a huge statistic. If we can reach that many, we're doing something right. So we're going into the classrooms. Let's just say the psych class in the high school, we spend an entire day there. We do a presentation for every class period for that teacher. I would go in with a PowerPoint, we do a PowerPoint, and then we also have a person with mental illness that's in recovery give their short personal story. So we're reaching out to these kids in prime ages. Peer-to-peer is the class that I mentioned a few minutes ago. It's a 10-week course for the person with mental illness. Obviously, you can't be in denial, and you need to be somewhat in a recovery type state or going in that direction. Okay. Here are some more. Veteran support groups are becoming really strong throughout Florida. I can speak for it just because of the PTSD and our people coming back from military service. Okay, any questions? Go ahead.
I didn't see anything about the family support groups. Is that part of the NAMI group?
Is there a list back there? I think we have a list of support groups back there on a flyer.
The NAMI connections group, do you have that in Orlando?
We do. We do have a connections group in Orlando. And I have our general brochure back there, and you can call our office and they
Thank
can
you.
get you all that information.
My
You're welcome.
question was that some people in Tampa, people also took the FamilyFamily in Sarasota.
Mhm.
Is there going to be any more training to facilitate? There's such a need in Tampa and Sarasota.
Well, I tell you what, I'm on the board of the NAMI, I'm on NAMI Florida's board now. And it's a sad state of affairs. And NAMI Florida, we used to get a DCF grant for the state, and it went directly to NAMI Florida. And NAMI Florida would set up the training of the teachers with all the different affiliates. That grant was pulled from us. And with the budget cuts, it's not a good situation for NAMI Florida right now. We are basically in the red at all times. It's a sad state financially for them.
How much was the grant?
$150,000. 150, I believe. Rita, we shut that? 150, I believe. And it has taken away our ability to help these different affiliates throughout the state be able to train. So considering that, I can speak for Orlando when I say that the money raised, such as the walk that I just did, we are going to have invest in our own trainings. You know, some of our affiliates are having to take that on themselves now. And we do have state-trained teachers, if you will, so they are trained to teach teachers. Does that make sense? Did I say that right? Okay. So they, you know, that's who, you know, obviously taught me how to teach family to family. So they are a state facilitator, if you will. And so they can hold trainings, and we can get more teachers trained to be able to get into these rooms.
And I'm sorry.
No, please.
In Tampa, we have the first Tuesday of every month, after you take a family, then you get followed up every Tuesday night for an hour and a half with the family connections.
Sure.
The NAMI family connections. The problem is, I can really take it to be a facilitator just for the family support and after taking control.
Sure.
But the problem is now, there's such a need for more
Such a need.
groups. You know, we only have one in Tampa, people run out.
Oh, yeah. I've had people drive from Titusville, which is the Cape by Cocoa, to Lake Mary to my class.
We can train more people to be facilitators.
It's the goal.
It's hard to-
It's the goal. It's the goal to be able to get into a class that quick as well versus having 40 people on a waiting list. Yeah, even those, and training the facilitators for those groups is even hard to come by these days, so.
Some people can't commit to 12 sessions.
It's hard.
Prices, but
Sure.
if you come, you see a lot of people come to the first.
You know, any of this is a huge commitment. Even teaching family to family, 1 night a week for 12 weeks for me every year, you know, that's 3 months out of my year. It's a huge commitment. I've missed soccer games for my daughter. You know, there's a commitment there, but it's, you know, it's one that you have to be able to take on. And if you're going to step into this and you're going to be an advocate, you got to jump in both feet and you got to make the commitment.
What about the lobbying efforts at the federal level? I mean, this
Call
is
your
a big
representative,
thing,
type an
right?
email, get on the phone. I can't
Okay.
stress that enough. Tell them to support mental illness. Tell them to put the funding back in.
Do you have lobbyists in
We,
from Florida? Do we have a group at all?
Well, Mental Health Awareness Week was in Tallahassee not long ago, and at the Capitol, they kind of all get together, if you will, and there were several people from NAMI that went and tried to tell their story and try to gain
Yeah,
gain
this
that
needs to be
momentum,
federal.
but
I mean,
it absolutely does. And so we encourage you to talk with your representatives frequently. We encourage you to flood their phone lines and let them know how important mental illness is to you, and we need them to fund the cause. The fact is our people do not belong in the jail system. They do not belong in prisons. Our people need facilities and they need beds when they're in crisis. And when we're cutting the funding and we're taking away all of this, we're taking away those beds. We're taking away treatment options for them. We need more treatment options.
We're really looking at, with developmental disabilities, looking at the dual diagnosis
Oh,
there.
yeah. Absolutely.
And just the way that goes, and it seems like people are hearing it for the first time.
It's amazing.
That our individuals with these
Sure.
cognitive problems end up with these, and they mask them, and then the behaviorals
Absolutely.
get thrown
Yeah, I mean,
out.
the fact is the autism, the slight autism can
Right.
mask some of these symptoms, and these symptoms can overlap with these symptoms, and they can all kind of merge together as well. So weeding through all of that, you can't do that without the
Well, and
knowledge
it's like
behind
we're
it.
trying to get our
Sure.
heads wrapped around it. What do
I
you
agree.
do, and what are some of the
I
things? So,
Wholeheartedly agree.
yeah, and
It's tough.
it will be going that way.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know,
I'm
it does
going to be
take-
on TV, which I've done several radio interviews in
Oh.
Orlando, and you're sitting in a room in front of a microphone. I can lay my notes out and I feel prepared, but I'm going to go on a small syndicated TV show, Emotional Mojo. I had
Oh.
never even heard of it, but it's in 100 markets, 24 million see it, and it's Tuesday, and I'm a nervous wreck. I can do this all day long and be fine, but for
Yeah,
whatever
because you
reason,
face the face,
yeah, I'm a little bit nervous about that, but I hope to reach a few people. Somebody heard the radio. I had 2 people hear the radio interview. It was aired at like 6 a.m. and 11 p.m. on like a Sunday. Well, I'm not up at 6 a.m. and I'm in bed by 11 p.m. So I thought, I don't know who will hear it, but we got to do it anyway. So 2 people that heard me on the radio called and got onto a list for the classes in Orlando. So it worked. It worked. We reached 2 people. We were successful, right?
Yeah.
And that's all we can ask for. When you take family to family, the night one, I'm very specific about this. If you leave nothing, when you come into that class, you feel completely alone, that no one else can be going through what you're going through, and you feel like there is no hope in the world for your loved one. When you leave family to family, if you leave with just hope and knowing that you're not alone, I've achieved what I was supposed to do, to be honest. Having hope for your loved one, being an advocate for them, and knowing that you're not alone in this process, that there are others out there, is a huge, huge relief. Anything else?
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.